So now I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Sarah. Sarah's the Community Engagement Specialist at the Land Conservancy of McHenry County, and she's going to walk us through the process of collecting native seed. Sarah?
Thanks so much, Liz. And thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about how to collect all the different groups of native plant seeds, how to store them and process them, and then how to actually sow them outside on the ground. I'm not going to be going over propagation, which is the process of actually growing the tiny seed in like a tray or an individual cell or pot or something like that, because that's a whole other program. But I do have a great resource for you at the end where you can learn more about that as well. Okay, so yep, I'm with the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. We are a nonprofit land trust about an hour northwest of Chicago. And what a land trust likes to do is preserve and take care of land and support the landowners who want to do the same thing. So we work with people who have yards and want to incorporate native plants and, you know, help their oak trees and all kinds of things like that. We also do native plant sales and trees and shrubs and volunteer work days. And there's lots of different ways for people to get involved with their local land trust. If you don't know who your local land trust is, because they're located around the whole country, you can go to findalandtrust.org and type in your zip code and you'll be able to find your local land trust there. Okay, so let's start. Why are we collecting native seeds? I mean, it's pretty easy. This was my daughter a few years ago. I don't know, she was like 11 or something, standing on the front sidewalk. She didn't even have shoes on. And she's collecting prairie drop seed. It's a very easy thing to do, especially when you have native plant gardens in your yard. It doesn't have to be time consuming at all. It is a great budget friendly way to get more native plants growing in your yard, or to share them with friends or with your library. They have this seed program, which is amazing that you guys do. It's very effective. Okay, no matter if you're propagating them yourselves, like in a tray outside, or what I do is I just throw them out into my plantings and let them grow. And that's what we do in our restorations as well. And it's very effective and successful as well. And it's really educational. This is how you learn about your plants. When you start physically interacting with them, looking at them up close, smelling them, like you're just really involved with them on a whole other level from when you're just standing and looking at them. And I encourage people to do this, especially since a lot of times once the flower is like faded away, people tend to ignore sometimes these plants. And a lot of times this is when they start to get really interesting. And you really start to see the bones of the plant this way. And it's just really relaxing and kind of like meditative when you're outside and you're just very simply performing this action of removing seeds from certain plants and putting them in a paper bag. Like, it's really nice. You can either just be silent, listen to a podcast, music, whatever you want to do, listen to the birds. It's really relaxing as well. All right, so some kind of guidelines for collecting seed. First of all, I want to say that public or private land not owned by you, if you're on land that you don't own, you have to have permission from the landowner in order to be able to collect seed. I don't care if it's the side of a road. I don't care if it's like some big open natural area. You need to have express permission from the landowner in order to do that. We've had situations at the Land Conservancy where we do own some properties that are road frontage along some pretty busy highways. And there's actually some really great rare plants growing in some of these properties. And we've had folks just picking plants and taking seeds and stuff from those because they were like, we didn't know anybody owned this. So please take the time to really get to know who owns that property before you collect anything. All right, so let's talk about how much to collect. If it is a perennial plant, which means it's a plant that comes, the same individual plant comes back year after year after year, it's fine to collect about 30% or so of the seed from that individual plant. Leave 70% of it on there to spread and create new plants, and also for wildlife to be able to eat. If it's an annual or a biennial or a really rare plant, we're going to recommend, like, best practices are that you only collect about 10% of that. Annuals are plants that only come back once a year from the seed that they drop. Biennials are a 2-year life cycle of that. So just look, you just got to eyeball it. Really, you don't have to stand there and like literally count, but about 10% of the seeds from the individual plant is the recommendation to collect. Yes, this here is a picture of my little niece who one Mother's Day or Father's Day or something, we were collecting some bloodroot seed from this little patch of bloodroot that my mom has on the side of her yard. And the seed pods are like stuck underneath there. And little Isabel got kind of enthusiastic and collected a little bit too many seeds that you could see down in the envelope there. So once we realized that, we made sure to return some of those seeds back to the area. And then we collected some for ourselves to be able to spread in new areas. Okay, so what do you need to be able to spread seed? Just stuff from your house, really. Okay, so just some stuff from your house, some gloves. Sorry about that. Some gloves are good. I like really thin gloves, so I can really feel what I'm doing. It depends on what I'm collecting. If it's something really spiky or sharp, like if I'm collecting a native thistle seed, I might wear thicker gloves for that. And just paper bags of different sizes are really helpful. Lunch bag size, grocery bag size, whatever. Some optional tools, these aren't required, but some optional tools. You can get a seed harvesting hook, which you could see there on the right. I actually use that for all different kinds of things, not just seed harvesting. It lets you grab a bunch of stalks or stems from a plant and just kind of, there's a serrated edge on that, and just cut them, a bunch of them at one time. It's very efficient. You can use scissors too. Heavy duty scissors are nice for this as well. Pliers are helpful for processing, and I'm going to talk more about that. And so is the rolling pin for certain things. If you're really fancy, you can use a seed apron, which is what that white thing is there in the bottom right. I've also just kind of jimmy rigged that with like the paper bags that have the handles on them, and I just have one handle stuck through my arm, but then sometimes those handles rip. And so if you're gonna do a lot of seed collecting, like hours and hours, multiple times during the year, then the apron is the nice thing because it just belts around your waist. Okay, so different kinds, I'm going to try to move this, perfect. Different kinds of milkweeds. So all the different seeds we're going to talk about tonight, they're split into different kinds of groups based on the similarity of their seed structures and like how the seeds distribute themselves. So before you can really learn about collecting seeds, we need to learn about how kind of the mechanisms of dispersal for these different groups. And so the first one we're going to start with are milkweeds. Everybody's really, into milkweed and propagating them and spreading them around because of monarch butterflies and the popularity of them, which is pretty awesome. So how do we know when these pods are ready and when the seeds are ready to be collected? So if you look on the left in the upper graphic there, you see red, no, yellow, yes. The red, no, the pod is still bright green. And when it's split open, the seeds are a very light tan color. What you're looking for under that yellow yes is the pod color isn't always indicative of whether or not it's completely ready. A lot of times that pod will start to split. It doesn't have to be completely split yet. It'll just like start to split, or when you press it with your thumb on the split, it'll easily pop open a little bit. And those seeds, that nice, dark, rich chestnut color, that's what you want to see. And then you know that this is ready to be collected. Same thing with the ones on the right. So those are the butterfly milkweed seeds, and the ones on the left are the common milkweed seeds. What I like to avoid doing is being too late and collecting this, like on the right there, collecting the seeds once they've started to fluff all over the place. That can, Liz and I were just talking about that. That can get a little much. But there's a few tricks that you can do with these seeds. One, you can put a little rubber band around some of the pods to actually prevent them from splitting open and like fluffing all over the place. You can also kind of scoop out the whole seed mass attached to the fibers. You could scoop it out as one, put it into like a paper bag with a couple coins in there, and clip a tiny little hole at the bottom of one of the corners of a bag and like shake it around. And then the seeds are just going to fall out through that little kind of corner when you tip it. The thing that Liz just told me she tried, and this is such a genius idea, is she uses her salad spinner and has tried that with a couple different kinds of seeds, including milkweed. And she puts the whole thing in her salad spinner. She takes the fluff and the seeds out of the pod, puts it in her salad spinner with a couple clothespins, because you need something to kind of create friction there. And she does a salad spinner and all the seeds drop through to the bottom. So kudos to Liz for coming up with that. I love it when people use stuff like this from around your house. Okay, the next thing we could talk about. All right, so the next group that we're going to talk about are seeds that shatter. So the milkweeds are seeds that are attached to that fluff that just kind of blows around in the wind, and that's how they are dispersed. Things that shatter, that just means that when it is ready, when it is ripe, when a seed is ripe, as soon as that seed structure is touched or bumped into by anything, it just falls to the ground. All right. And when I talk about a seed being ripe, what that means is that the plant has reached its correct time in its development cycle for that year of growth, that all of the development that seed needs to be ready to be a viable plant the next year is completed. Okay. If you collect seeds too early in the season, there might be a structure there, but it just hasn't had time to complete that process yet. So that's why it's important to learn how to recognize like when these seeds are ripe. So when a plant in the shattering group, when those are ripe, they literally come off that plant super easily. They might just fall to the ground. Bottle brush grass, that's what we're looking at here. This is a really attractive shade to part sun, like savanna kind of grass, which is just like a really open, sunny woodland. I know the picture doesn't show me doing this, but I usually wear gloves when I'm going to be collecting a lot of bottle brush grass. It can be a little bit sharp. This is a great one for woodland restorations. I think this is a video. Yeah, let me play this video for you here. So you just start with your hand at the bottom of the seeds and you just pull straight up. It's pretty simple. And then you take those and you throw them in a paper bag and you just keep on collecting more. So the actual seed structure itself, if you look to the right, because there's a lot of kind of extraneous stuff attached to the actual seed. The seed itself is circled in yellow there that you could see to the right. The things that are attached to it, those are called awns on a grass. That's what that structure is called. All different grasses have different lengths of those awns attached to their seeds, and that's one identifying characteristic. Okay, so another seed that shatters is hazelnut, which is a native shrub. So shrubs, yeah, we can collect those too. Pretty cool. This is one that if you touch the nut when it's brown and ripe, like you see in the upper right corner there, if you touch that, bump into that, squirrels just knock it, whatever, those seeds just fall off. All right, so they shatter and they fall to the ground. The nuts themselves are ripe when they're that dark brown color. Those like eyelash looking structures that are surrounding the seed itself, those are called bracts. When that whole thing like on the left is green, those are not ripe. But I can tell you that that's what they look like in like August. And that's when the squirrels start taking them pretty much. And they eat them anyway. And they're like, I don't care. But they will also bury them too. They'll bury them, especially when they're, I'm guessing when they're ripe and they're storing them for the winter. And so I find little baby hazelnuts growing around my yard. It's pretty cool. Okay, so you can collect them earlier before they're totally ripe. And I've heard of people doing it. I've never done this because the squirrels just do it, but they collect them when they're green and they'll lay them out on a tarp in the sun. And somehow you've got to keep rodents from eating them, but they'll lay them out on a tarp in the sun to ripen over time. To get into the nut itself, you can use pliers or a nutcracker or something like that. I can tell you the squirrels do a really good job of just distributing these around for me. Okay, so plants that have these like berry-like structures. So it's not technically a berry. It's called a drupe. The reason that it's called a drupe is because it is a singular seed inside each of those little berry-looking structures. There is one seed inside there and it is surrounded by the fleshy fruit. Berries would have all kinds of seeds located on the outside of the fruit. Okay, so that's the difference between a drupe and a berry. Whatever, it's kind of semantics for our purposes tonight. I like to wear gloves if I'm going to be collecting these when they're super, super ripe, because they're going to stain your hands, and some people, it irritates their skin a little bit. Or the other thing, so here's what I like to do. Any plant that has a drupe like this, when they're ripe and they're bright red like that, not the mottled red and white like you see on the bottom left part where it says not ready and there's an arrow pointing to a mottled like white and red, those are going to feel hard. Don't collect those. They're not ready yet. The deep red ones that are mushy-ish when you touch them, those are ready. So I'll collect those. Now, I personally am not saving these seeds until the middle of the winter, okay? If these dry out, these drupe plants, if they dry out while you're storing them, that seed is no longer going to be as viable, all All right. So your chances of germination go down. So personally, what I like to do, I'll collect them. You can hold them for like a day or two or something like that. You can store them and keep them moist in the fridge as well. Honestly, a lot of times I'll just collect them and sew them that same day. So direct sew. That's like the easiest thing that I do with them. But if you need to hold them for a day or two, you can. Or longer. If you're gonna, just don't let them mold, because once they mold, it's pretty much done. They're not going to be viable after that. All right, what are we looking at? Oh, this is Starry Falls Solomon Seal. These are all over the place right now at this time at the end of September. I'm finding these all over in the woods. Okay, here's another drupe example that we're seeing all over in the woods, Jack in the Pulpit. So when that cluster of drupes is dark green, they are not ready for collection yet. When they're dark red, then those are ready for collection. And you can see the picture under the dime. Those are the actual seeds from inside the drupe. And if you think about it, this makes sense that they lose viability if they dry out, because these drupes, what they're doing, their bright red fleshy structure there is encouraging animals to eat them. All right. So these are designed to go through an animal's digestive tract and be exposed to the acids in the stomach, bacteria and stuff in the intestines, and who knows what else, and then to be excreted out. That's what these seeds want to happen in order for germination to occur. All right. So if you let them like mold somewhere in your garage, just sitting in a paper bag, it's not going to happen. So there's a lot of like, you can sit there and clean the fruit off of them, off of the seed. You can do that to, I don't know, speed germination. Personally, for like the super majority of homeowners though, I'm like, let's just keep it simple. Just keep it totally simple. Pull those little red guys off of there, pull those little red drupes off, and just kind of fling them around in your woods. Really, just that coating is going to break down. Yes, maybe some animals will find them and eat them and then excrete them out. Awesome. Perfect. Because then we've got the acids and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Okay. So another group are the coneflowers. All right. And this is like another really popular group that everybody knows about. So this that we're looking at is pale purple coneflower, Echinacea pallida. You can see how it is the cone head shape. So the central cone, that triangle there in the middle, is what the seeds are directly attached to. All right. And then there's the spiky structures coming off of the seed. So the seed itself is not that external, crazy, really sharp, spiky structure. It's the little white cream colored thing that I have circled in yellow there. That's the actual seed, and it's attached to the central cone. I think it looks like a molar or like a tooth of some kind. If you look on the bottom, I've got it circled in yellow as to what it looks like. So if you have coneflowers in your yard, take one of the seed heads, put it on a paper towel or cutting board or something, and cut it in half, you know, from top to bottom. And you're really going to start to learn about this to find like, where is the actual seed itself? This is part of the fun of the discovery and of learning about this. All right. So how do you know when these are actually ready to be collected? So not when the flower petals are on them. So the rule of thumb with a lot of these plants is about a month after the flower petals have faded. It's a good rule of thumb. Usually the seeds are going to be ready to be collected at that point. So those long, droopy, pale pink, they look like petals, are really called gray florets, whatever. Once those are gone and that central cone is just this like really dark, almost black looking color, then we know that they're ready to be collected. Now, to process them, so I just take scissors or clippers or whatever, and I just clip off all the different cone structures entirely. All right, so I'll just clip the whole thing up, put them in paper bags. Later in the winter at some point is when I start to process them. And I'm going to show you some pictures of that, but processing just means like removing all the extra plant material from the seed itself. And that just speeds up your chances of germination. And, you know, and it makes sense. You're like kind of taking the coat and all the like stuff off of the seed, and then it's going to speed it up. So to process these, sometimes people will put the whole seed head into like a really heavy bag of some kind, like a canvas bag or a heavy paper bag, and they'll stomp on it like with their feet, literally. I will just use pliers and just rip them, just kind of rip into them. Or, and you'll hear me say this a few times tonight, if you're just running out of time during the winter before throwing these out into wherever you want them to grow, you can just throw the whole seed head out there. And I mean, yeah, it's going to take longer for germination to occur, but it's not doing you any good just like sitting in your garage for a year, right? Just throw the whole seed structure out there. And eventually over time, they'll germinate. Okay. The next group are the crumbly cone heads. These are some of my favorites to collect because they're very soft. And I just love how they feel. And I take my gloves off for these because I want to feel them. So an example of a crumbly cone head are the prairie clovers, like purple prairie clover. These are super fun. So how do we know when they're ready to collect? So what I would do, like with that picture on the left there, I would put my hand at the bottom of the seed structure and gently tug upwards. And if the seeds super easily dislodge in my hand as I'm pulling up, I know that it's time to collect them. If I pull up and I meet resistance and it doesn't want to come off, okay, they're not ready to collect yet. The seeds are, and you can see them in that picture on the left, the seeds are found inside tiny little gray structures that are really soft. So like the coating is really soft around them. It's not necessary for you to like process those in any way. Really, it breaks down pretty easily. And these germinate pretty decently. They don't take like 5 years or something to germinate outside. I get these going in my lawn prairie within like 2 to 3 years, probably. Okay, foxglove beard tongue. This is another one that Liz said she used her salad spinner for, which is really cool. This is one that has a seed structure called a beak. So you could see it in that picture in the bottom left there where they're in my hand, how they're open and it looks like a tiny bird mouth or something. Once these start to open like that, it looks like a beak. And the seeds, when you tip them, they're going to fall out into your hand. Okay. Now, if you try to open those before that beak is opened itself, they're extremely hard. Like you can't really crack them open with just your fingers. You have to literally take like a meat mallet or something. So if it's later in the season, because these bloom in like June. So that means that by like the middle to end of July, they should be ready to collect. If they're not open yet, you can do the meat mallet thing to open them up. They smell weird. I don't like the smell of them at all. So I don't know. I keep those like in a closet or something. where I don't have to smell them all the time. Like I smell those just walking through my prairie. The scent is really distinct. Okay. Yeah. Process them by putting them in a bag, using a rolling pin or meat mallet, whatever. You could stomp on them. You can use Liz's cool salad spinner thing too. That only works though if those beaks are already popped open a little bit. All right. I was just doing this yesterday. Wild bergamot. Okay, so this is a shaker group. That just means you have to shake these to get them to dislodge. So on the left is what it looks like when it's got the little petals. They're really called florets, those purple things coming off. About a month after those have faded away, that's when you're left with the seed structure on the right. You guys, if you have never squeezed and smelled this Monarda seed head, is the best smell. I love it. It's like this citrus mint smell somehow. It's awesome. So you can see the tiny tubes there. The seed is located down inside that tube. So what you do, you can either clip these off, you know, with scissors or clippers. Sometimes you can even just pull them off with your hand and then tip it upside down and just kind of, you can just tap it in your hand and you can see it, the seeds are extremely tiny. You can see how small they are in that picture there. Out in the field though, I'll just clip as many seed heads as I want to collect and then just put the entire seed head into a paper bag. And I'm saving those for later in the winter, okay, to be able to spread. Okay, so here is another fluffy seed. So these are similar to milkweeds in that they have fluff attached to them, but there's no pod structure. So this is Joe Pye weed. There's a couple different kinds of Joe Pye weeds that we have here in Northern Illinois. There's purple Joe Pye weed. That's this one, grows in like the woods. And then there's the spotted Joe Pye weed, which grows in wet areas. So how do you know when they're ready to collect? When they start to be fluffy like this. So they're dispersed by the wind, just blowing that fluff around. And the seed itself, if you look at that picture in the upper left, the seed is attached to the fluff. So this is a pretty, you know, well understood dispersal mechanism here. And the way to collect it, you got to be careful because if you disturb it too much, all the seeds are just going to be blowing away as you're trying to get them. So I'll hold the central stem really still and then just clip. So I'm not clipping like each individual little stem that the seed structure is attached to. I'm just doing the whole seed head down at the bottom and then carefully taking it, tipping it over, tip it so that the seed structure goes into the bag first. All right, because if it's upright, they're going to be able to just like blow out of your bag. So this applies to all kinds of the fluffy seeds. Asters do this, the goldenrods, native thistles can do this too. So all of these fluffy seeds, how do you know when they're ready to be collected? When they're fluffy like this. All right, hitchhiking seeds. So these aren't super common in home gardens because a lot of people just get really annoyed when seeds stick to them and so they don't want them in their garden. This is a really cool plant though, showy tick trefoil or desmodium. I mean, I see this in like prairie restorations and stuff. This is a really nice native plant. And I love the little seed structures here. So the whole pod is called a loment and it's made up of little individual seeds that have their own little compartment. And it's so cool. I love looking at that. So how do you know when they're ready to be collected? Just like when they stick to you. And so you don't have to like de-hull these. You can literally just throw these outside over the winter in their complete structure like that, it breaks down pretty well. Okay. Okay, these are really neat. Ballistic seeds, that just means these are seeds that fling. They like catapult and they're awesome. I took this video a few years ago with my daughter. It was like during COVID and we were all just, you know, stuck at home. So jewelweed, this is a really neat one and I've got a video of it. Let me play it. It's so cute. I love it. I gotta play it again. Okay, so basically what this means is once the seed is ripe, the ballistic like mechanism is activated and the seeds are going to disperse by flinging, some of them up to 30 feet away, depending on the species. And there's a couple different examples of native plants that do that around here. This is jewelweed. You find it growing in like ditches and creeks and places where there's water kind of disturbing the area. Hummingbirds love these. Gerania, wild geranium does this. Violets do this, toothwort, prairie flax. This is a really cool seed mechanism, but it's kind of hard to collect these. If you think about it. So it depends on how dedicated you're going to be to collecting this kind of seed. What you can do is you can just really learn the ripening sequence and really get to know the individual plant and know right before it's going to reach that stage of ballistic flinging and you harvest it right before that. That's tricky to do that. Some people will cover the seed head itself with a mesh hood, right? Like before it's reached that ripening stage. So then when it does fling, the seeds they're caught within like a little mesh bag. Some people can, let's see, what else do they do? Oh, they will harvest it and store it, like harvest it before it is flung and store it in like a paper bag or a mesh bag or something for a couple days. And then, you know, it'll fling. With these ballistic seeds, it's best to direct sow them. So that means like, don't hold them. Don't hold them until the middle of the winter. Don't hold them for 4 or 5 months or something and expect those seeds to be viable. And that makes sense if you think about it, you know, because these are seeds. Like, I like to keep things as simple as possible and kind of mimic what nature's going to do with these. I think that's how you get the best germination. So don't hold on to these ballistic seeds. Just sow them right away where you want them to grow. Okay, we're going to play a game. It's called Ready or Not. So basically, I'm going to show you 2 side-by-side pictures of the same species, and you're going to choose either number 1 or number 2 as to which one is ready to be harvested. So which seeds are ripe. You don't need to like put the answer in the chat or anything. Just like yell it out to yourself. And I'll tell you which one is right. Okay, so the first one is tall thimbleweed. Which one is ready? Number 1 on the left or number 2 on the right? So number 1, we see it's still kind of greenish looking. Number 2, it's starting to be fluffy. And yes, number 2 on the right. Good job. Yeah. So this is one of those ones where when you pull up on it, it's really soft. And I love, it's like crumbly cone head or something, I think is the group. And I love collecting these. So yes, number 2, darker structure itself. And it's actually starting to be fluffy a little bit. Okay, here we go with this is purple coneflower. So not pale purple coneflower, but purple coneflower. Number 1 on the left is dark and black and a black stem. Number 2 on the right, we've got all different colors in that cone structure still, bright green stem. The ray florets are still fully attached and actually still have color to them. So which one is ready to be collected? Number 1 on the left, very good. Okay, here we go, Golden Alexander. Number 1 on the left, dark in color. Number 2 on the right, greenish in color, reddish stems. And this is a shattering group here. So like as soon as you hit it, when they're ripe, they just fall off. And it's number 1 on the left is ready to be collected. Okay, this one requires a video. This is our final exam. Just kidding. Okay, so the first video on the left, I'm going to play that. This is Prairie Dock. And this one's fun to figure out what is the actual seed too. Okay, so that's that video. And if you look on the bottom right there, you can see what the actual seeds are. I have them circled. They kind of look like, it almost looks like a sunflower seed that you would eat, but it's way flatter than that. All right, and here's the video on the right to see, are these ready to be collected? Sorry, guys. Yes, it's the one on the left. It's number 1. Good job. Okay, so these are really cool because they've got all kinds of structures attached to them. And so finding the actual seed is the fun one. All right, so how to properly store your seeds. Mold is the biggest enemy that we want to avoid. So air circulation is important. And keeping them away from rodents is equally as important, okay? Not letting things eat them because obviously all these seeds are kind of like a smorgasbord, all right? If you need to temporarily have them in a plastic bag when you're out in the field, because that's all that you have, that's fine. Just transfer them to a paper bag at some other, soon after you get home. Don't long-term store them in those. I use those large lawn waste bags and I'll put all the individual species in them instead of having all this. Next to some liquor, there's okay. Can you guys hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, yep. Perfect. Sorry about that. I must have lost my connection. All right. So how to process our seeds. This is just removing the surrounding plant material. Okay. You don't have to do this, but it's going to speed up germination. This is a really great project to do over the winter. My daughter liked to help with this. It's pretty simple. You just use your hands. I wear thin gloves. I like to keep the species kind of separated until I get to this stage, at which point I make my little mixes for certain areas of my yard. So I'll be like, all right, all these certain species I know are going to go into my woods. So I'm going to process them all into, this particular bucket. So you just use stuff from around your house, tarps, tweezers, pliers, rolling pins, depending on the different kind of seed. The extra plant material that comes off of the seed, I save that into a separate bucket. There could be cool little beneficial insects in there. So that is going out as well. All right. I'm throwing that out into the woods or wherever as well. Okay. Oh, this is a little video here. So some seeds like from gentian, this cream gentian, are extremely powdery and fine. All right. So this is going to show you why doing this right over a bucket is a good idea, because they're just tiny and you can barely even see anything, but it's just going down into the bucket there. Okay. All right. So here's a bunch of different kinds of woodland seeds, all just ready to be thrown out into the woods. So here's how we do that. In the snow. So you're going to throw your seeds out where they're ready to grow anytime between November and February. A sled, if there's snow on the ground, is a great way to transport everything out. Again, if you haven't gotten like to fully processing all the seeds, and this happens to me every winter, fine, just throw the entire seed head out there. It's not a big deal. Distributing your seed, how do you actually do that? So I like to do it personally. I like to do it in like January or so. And I really like to do it when there's snow on the ground so I could see where I'm actually throwing it. But I've done it just on bare soil too. It's really cool if you do it either as it's snowing or right before it snows, because then your seed gets covered up and birds and stuff don't eat it. If you're doing a very certain area that maybe like you killed your grass in a certain area and you want the seeds to go there, flag that before it snows. Because once the snow covers it, you're not going to know where that is. Seed can take a long time to germinate. Different species, some of them grow right away the first year. Others take 5 years to grow, okay? And there's learning about the germination requirements for all these different native plants is extremely interesting. And you can go to Prairie Moon Nursery's website, and I've got it on the resource slide at the end. And they all have attached to them, and Prairie Moon describes to you what those germination codes mean. So some of them need to be cold stratified for 60 days. That just means that they need to be outside in the cold, freezing and thawing for at least 60 days in order for germination to be able to happen. All right. So, and there's so many different requirements that all different kinds of seeds have. In your seeded areas, don't let weeds make seeds in there. Okay. That's a whole other program too. All right. So there's some spring and early summer blooming wildflowers that people forget about. All right. A lot of times people are only thinking about seeds right in the fall. And a lot of these early spring bloomers are awesome, and you can collect seed from them too. It's just that I'm going to recommend that you direct sow those seeds. Don't hang on to them. So I think the rule of thumb is like, if the seeds are ready before June, so like June or earlier, if the seed is ripe and ready, direct sow it. Okay. Don't hang on to it and try to store it for months. It's going to lose viability. Bloodroot. So such an amazing woodland wildflower. The little seeds are inside these pod structures. So about a month or so after all the petals fall off of the flowers, these little pod structures are there. And it's kind of like a milkweed pod, when you press on it and it pops open easily. If those seeds are dark brown like that, like a chestnutty brown, and they have that little weird white thing attached to them, they're ready to be collected and sowed right away. The white thing that's attached to them, that little white structure, that's called an elaiosome, and it's like a fatty lipid-filled structure that ants want to eat. So they take these seeds and their jaw size, the specific species of ant, their jaw size matches the size of that seed. They're able to take the whole thing with the elaiosome into their tunnels under the ground. They eat the elaiosome, they discard the seed in like a waste chamber of their tunnels, which is filled with like dead ant bodies and like their excrement. And that's where the seed goes, because they don't want that. They only want the elaiosome, and it's the perfect situation for that seed to germinate. Okay. So like, I don't know. To me, don't even try to replicate that yourself in like a tray. Just throw these things out there right away and let the ants take care of it for you. And you're going to find little blood roots popping up all over the place. It's really, really cool. These are the ones that my little niece and I were collecting in mid-June. So I think it was Father's Day when we were doing that. Spring Beauties. So this one is a beak. If you look at that picture on the right, those little structures open up and there's the little seed inside of it. And the seed is pretty big, well, ish, in these. It's not like a tiny powder type seed. And once they're kind of like dark brown and that seed opens like that, or the beak opens, the seeds are ready to fall out. Distribute those within a day or two, usually around the middle of May or so. Ginger, this is really cool. So a lot of these woodland guys have little elaiosomes attached to them because they want the ants to take them. Ginger is a little bit tricky to find. Where is the actual seed? So if you look at that picture in the top left there, you actually have to dig into the bottom, like the back of the structure, to start finding the seeds. It's pretty interesting. And you know that they're going to be ready when that whole part of it back there is like mushy and starting to kind of decay a little bit. If it's like super firm when you press on it, it's not ready yet. Okay. And so when it's mushy, you can dig into it and find the little seeds in there. And they look pretty similar to bloodroot seeds, and they're going to have the little elaiosome attached to them. Prairie smoke. This is a shattering one here. I love this. This is usually ready around the middle of June. So it's a direct sow species. You can see it's got the wispy white little filaments that are attached to the seed. So the seed is circled in yellow there. When you tug on those little filaments, if the seed easily dislodges, comes out, then it's ready. If you tug and you meet resistance, it's not ready yet, okay? Take these, don't store them for a super long time, but take them and just direct, so push them into little cracks and stuff in your garden. Oh, here's a bunch of it in a bowl. I think it looks really, really cool. Okay, so if you become a member of your local land trust, a lot of us do seed collecting events like we do at the Land Conservancy for our members. And so like in October, we'll get together at a restored conservation easement, like a private conservation easement. We have like a potluck and stuff. And we teach people how to collect all different kinds of seeds. You get to keep some of the seed. We collect and keep some of the seed and use it on our restorations. It's pretty awesome. And if you have seed to share, bring it with. Very cool. Or if you have a seed to share, give it to your local library if they're doing a seed program, a seed sharing program, like Liz is doing with the Barrington Library. Okay, here are a bunch of resources. Where to buy different kinds of seed, native plant seed. Got those at the top there. Those are reputable nurseries who are going to carry native plants okay, to our region. How to garden with seeds and from seed mixes. That Garden Revolution book is amazing. And then I told you at the beginning, I was going to give you a resource for propagating seed. So that's you literally sowing these seeds into a little tray and overwintering them, and then having a tiny, tiny little seedling the next spring or summer and that kind of stuff. Wild Seed Project is a great resource for that. Okay. Okay. So the Field Museum Guide to like every habitat that we have here. Those guides are amazing. They were developed by the Lake County Forest Preserve District and the Volunteer Stewardship Network. They're amazing, and they're written in like normal language, okay? And they're meant for any normal person. You don't need an advanced degree in science to be able to understand this, on how to identify the plant from its seed structure, and then how to collect the actual seeds and store them. Okay, so those are a free resource that anybody can download from the Field Museum's website. Field Museum has a ton of different free guides that are amazing. We run a Facebook group called Learn, where people can just post questions and stuff. And then on Instagram, I just recently discovered this guy, Seed Tech Luke, with Citizens for Conservation. He has a pretty good Instagram account that's just dedicated to collecting seeds and learning about all these different seed structures from native plants. So it's a pretty cool Instagram account to check out as well.